Welcome to our our public meeting, our 2 o'clock public meeting for Thursday, March, is it the 8th? 9th. Here we go.
2023.
Thank you, sir. All right, would you all join me in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Missoula County would like to acknowledge that this event takes place in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. Before we dive in much deeper here, do we have any public announcements?
Yes, I will share. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you're meeting virtually today, instructions for turning on the closed captioning are on your screen. If you're joining us in person, you'll have closed captioning on all of the screens here in the Sophie Moyes room and also have assistive listening devices available. Please come see me if you'd like a device. We ask that all speakers today, please remember to speak slowly and clearly during the meeting. This helps with the accuracy of the closed captioning. There will be multiple chances during the meeting for public comment. For those joining us virtually, if you'd like to speak, use the raise hand feature. If you're on Microsoft Teams, that's the small hand button. If you're calling in on the phone, you need to hit *5 to raise your hand. And once called in and called on, you need to hit *6 to unmute. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach me during the meeting. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Kyla. Do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will keep moving along. Our current claims list, claims received as of February 21st, 2023 to February 28, 2023 by the Commissioner's Office total $2,103,614.26. Today we have 2 hearings. Our first hearing is on a cable franchise agreement, and our own Chris Lounsbury will present.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Chris Lounsbury, the Chief Administrative Officer for Missoula County. So, Commissioners, today you have before you a request to sign a cable franchise with TDS, which is opening a new cable franchise in Missoula. You might recall from about 2 years ago, in June of 2020, you signed a cable franchise agreement with Spectrum Charter Communications. What these franchise agreements allow is for cable companies to be able to run the cable inside the county's right-of-way along roadways. And for that, they pay a small fee that is based off the percentage of users and revenue to 2 locations. One is to Missoula County to help make sure that our programs, such as the Commissioners meeting today, are available on the public access channel, which in our case is Missoula Community Access Television, or MCAT. And the other piece of that fee helps to provide the technology that you use in Sophie Moise and your other rooms to make sure that that information from public meetings is available and accessible to the public. And so this agreement mirrors the charter agreement as far as that. All of the provisions in it are actually set by federal law, so there's very little negotiation that actually occurs between Missoula County and cable franchisees. But this agreement today just allows for that second service to begin providing service in Missoula County and using county right-of-way.
Thanks, Chris. You guys have any questions?
I might. Is the applicant here or online?
Because we have so much flexibility.
I was just out. I was just out at their facility.
Oh,
you
right.
did the ribbon
right.
cutting.
The ribbon cutting.
I witnessed the ribbon being
Nice, nice.
cut. Yes. So the governor was out there. The mayor was out there. I welcomed them all to Missoula County
Well
since
done, well done.
since it was outside of the city limits.
Great, great.
I guess my question for you, Chris, would be, what is the small fee, and how much might that? I guess would this depend on? I'm sure it would on the build out of their network. So initially, it might be 0 for a while, and how small is small?
Commissioners, you are correct. Commissioner Sturmeyer, you are correct. in that until they actually begin providing services, and in particular cable television services, because this only applies to cable television, not to other services they might offer, such as internet or phone service, the fee probably will be zero for some period of time. And then based on the number of subscribers they have and the revenue that's generated, again, off just that cable TV piece, if I remember correctly, it's approximately 3% that the county gets. If we were to use Spectrum Charter, for example, as the tool or as a measuring stick, that generates, I believe, I would want to confirm this, commissioners, but if I remember correctly, it's somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 that it generates.
Were you at a different ribbon cutting? It was for cable TV?
Well, they offer both cable and
Oh,
that would be unfortunate if I was at the wrong ribbon cutting.
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Allegedly, it was Greg Gianforte. I don't know. He was bald. So that's interesting. So with Charter, refresh my memory. So similarly, it's only for the TV portion of that we is that per federal law?
That is correct. The law that they operate under only applies to cable television providers, so we cannot tax or impose a fee on their internet or phone services, even as those continue to expand and cable television continues to diminish.
When we had asked Tester's staffer, oh gosh, Olivia, forgetting her name, about this, because Jason Emery had raised those same concerns that that it needs to be more expansive and not just cable TV. It needs to be included. Right, exactly.
Yeah, that.
But we haven't heard back from her, but
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Somebody have a
well,
motion?
yeah, I motion to adopt cable franchise agreement. Sorry.
Our legal counsel had a comment.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Anybody who would like to speak to this, you are more than welcome to. Now is the time. Okay, seeing none.
Still
let's
motion
move
to
forward.
adopt the cable franchise agreement with TDS.
I will second that, and I guess at some point in time it might be available out at the King Ranch. I don't know.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be fantastic. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Chris.
commissioners.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, our next hearing is on the King Ranch Golf Course boundary line relocation, and Jenny Dixon will present.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. So this is a boundary line relocation at King Ranch Golf Course, requested by Forlorn Hope LLC, with a managing partner representative of that company being Jack McInerney. They are represented by a local engineering firm, Voith Engineering, here in town, and they are here today to answer questions. As mentioned, this is the King Ranch Golf Course out southwest of the interchange at Frenchtown. And I have a few vicinity maps that will get you oriented to the general location. You can see here the aerial that shows kind of what's happening on the property as far as an old railroad bed goes through, river, I believe it was after the 97 floods. This river changed drastically over in this part of Missoula, and so you see a lot of riverine characteristics. And then, of course, you have two subdivisions called King Ranch. Phases 1 and 2 and 3 are nearby, and I'll show you what those look like as well. But this is the general location here, showing you how it's not far at all from that interchange onto the interstate. The golf course occupies a majority of land the majority is all of it is in an area designated for open and resource. And that is shown on the map on the left. And again, that also gives you some more vicinity orientation with the Frenchtown Pond on the upper left-hand corner of that image. The open and resource designation recommends an overall density, residential density of 1 dwelling unit per 40 acres. along with, of course, open and resource and agricultural types of uses. And golf course is considered an agricultural use. Their proposal is a little more dense than the land use recommendation in terms of how many homes they are proposing to put on this property. However, this is one of about 25 criteria that we look at, and it is not necessarily a project killer. The property is also in the activity circle for Frenchtown, as included in our 1975 land use plans. Activity circles were intended to reinforce community focal points and by minimizing expenditures for capital facilities by keeping everything close together. So the property, as I mentioned, there's a lot of riverine effects on this property from the movement of the river and also inclusion of much of the property in the floodplain. It is important to note that the area that they are proposing to do a boundary line relocation of these 12 properties will not be on any part of the floodplain. The floodplain will be only on the golf course. It's a small area, as you can see there. It seems like a tiny little sliver, but it's enough space to do the lots that they're proposing along this Mullen Road frontage here. And then over here is the 2-acre commercial mixed use lot that they want to create through boundary line relocation. And right now there is the clubhouse is on that property.
I'm sorry, I can't read the key, the yellow hash mark to the west.
It's to the west.
Or yeah, yep.
You mean this up
yeah,
here?
that or, but which
So that's a shaded zone X, and I think there's been like a letter of map revision. And essentially, I think what it did is it clarified that the base flood elevation at this in this area is, I want to say 3125, and so all of the lots will be above that base flood elevation.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And yeah, these don't show up very well. I mean, this is to give you the gist of what the current layout of the 12 tracks looks like right now. The COS shown on the left here, you can see it doesn't exactly look like the colored 12 tracks on the right, and that's because the portion in section 4 on the south, kind of a triangle, an upside down kind of triangle, is not part of this request, even though it's part of their property. They are proposing to take 12 tracks within the area outside of section 4 and relocate them to look like this. So if you're going back to this, none of these tracks, these 12 tracks that make up that northern part of the King Ranch Golf Course are over 40 acres. They're either 40 acres or less, I should say. They want to bring 10 of those 12 tracks up to the Mullen Road frontage and put duplex units on those properties with shared driveways. This, again, as I mentioned, would be the clubhouse property with additional potential development. I'm going to show you a conceptual site plan that they have, but this is just showing the tract layout right now. And then the remaining 239 acres here in the green, it will remain the golf course. These lots here are about 0.15 acres each. So, and so a 0.15 with a duplex, we'll have one unit of a duplex and the other 0.15 will be the other side of the duplex. So 0.3 acres for a duplex with shared driveways. King Ranch Phase 1 and Phases 2 and 3 actually were all proposed and approved by the commission in 1990. They were Phase 1 was platted in 95 and Phases 2 and 3 were platted in 96. And at that time, the golf course was not part of those subdivisions, but because it was part of the Bud King Ranch, it was looked at kind of at its entirety and how it interacted and integrated with the golf course, with the intent being that these were supposed to be golf course kind of residential golf course lots, with each of the lots backing onto golf course area, even including phase 1, because as I understand it, and you can kind of see, I'm not sure if it's on this one. There's a putting, some putting that greens that go behind those lots and then come back around, and so it all was functioning together. It's important to note in this boundary line relocation that they are not creating any tracts that you would be able to further divide without some sort of review, either through another exemption request or subdivision review. And the reason for that, and the reason I bring that up, is when we see tracts kind of being consolidated and leaving one large tract, we do make sure that that situation is not being created where more tracts can be created without review. So in this case, because you can create a 160, and this is a 239 acres, they can't create that, 2 lots, because you have to have 320 to create a 160 that doesn't require review. So, so that's not a concern here. These are the 2 King Ranch approvals, the subdivisions approvals from the 90s. And the reason I'm sharing these with you is that they do play a role in the evasion evaluation with one of the criteria is to look at what's being proposed. Is it kind of mirroring what's happening near it? And if so, that can be an indication of evasion. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but just to show you, and I've shown with the yellow and the red shapes where the development is proposed with this boundary line relocation relative to those 2 subdivisions filed in the 90s. This is their proposed site plan that shows a little bit more detail with the aerial photo underneath, and also their proposed sewer and water sources that will come. They'll need to get DEQ approval for those to serve this development. And you can see on the clubhouse property, the potential addition of buildings there that are more on the front of fronting onto Mullen Road, where that red arrow ends. And so really for the rest of the presentation, most of the rest of the presentation, I just want to go over the evasion criteria, of which there are about 6 of them that when we looked at it, we did indicate to you that those are possible clues to evasion, but for almost all of them, we were able to find kind of a counteracting argument or reason that you could also find that they're not. And just, I guess, in light of, to make it clear as we go through these, staff is recommending approval of this boundary line relocation because we did look at the 20 or 25 or so evasion criteria, 6 of which could be considered to be triggered. And I'm going to just go over those for your information here this afternoon. So the first one is a claimant in the business. And I know this is a lot of text on slides, but for the benefit of people at home, this is pretty technical, and I wanted people to be able to follow along. So is a claimant in the business of constructing or dividing, developing or selling land? The applicant, as I mentioned, Forlorn Hope, was created, the company was created in 2004 for the purpose of managing ranch properties, and this is the only golf course they own and manage. And Jack McInerney, being the managing partner as well as a realtor, caused us to kind of take a second look at that and see what kind of role he was playing in this transaction. He will not be the realtor for any of the newly created lots, nor would he be a sole beneficiary of any of those transactions beyond his role as a partner in Forlorn Hope, who manages ranch properties. The second evasion criterion, was the original tract transferred to the claimant within the past 2 years? And the answer to that is yes, but it was within the last, it was a year and a half ago. And so one way for the applicant, and what this does is it tells you, you know, are people just buying and selling with the intent of to kind of move things around a lot? And while the answer to this is yes, it has been a year and a half, 5 or 6 months from now, if they applied, the answer would be no. Of course, that's the same for everybody, but it has been more than about 75% of those 2 years. Has the property been the subject of a scoping or a pre-app meeting for a subdivision prior to this application? Scoping meetings are different than pre-app meetings. Scoping meetings, as I consider them to be, really kind of information gathering by the applicant to help them understand what the rules are, what the site is, what the site characteristics are that they may need to take into consideration. And so when they met with us in April of 2022, they did talk to us about, we're thinking about doing a subdivision here, and we helped them determine different, you know, a variety of courses of action. They did come back about 6 months later, having decided not to pursue subdivision, and did a pre-application meeting for a boundary line relocation. So the answer to this question is yes and no. So, will the division result in a pattern of development equivalent to subdivision review without local government review? And then there are a couple of options that help indicate whether there's a pattern of development. And the first one is, are there 6 or more tracts? Yes, there are 12. Is there an overall development plan which appears equivalent to a subdivision? And then kind of related to that, the other 2 below that, are there tracts, the platted lots near these tracts that share a common road or are similar in shape and size? And so all of these tracts are going to access onto Mullen Road. They share a common road with other subdivisions, the King Ranch phases 1 and 2 that, and 3 that also utilize the Mullen Road, and they are somewhat similar in size and shape. The King Ranch tracts are ½ acre. These are about, you know, 15, I guess, about 0.15 acres each. So while and what this is getting at is, has someone come in and done either a subdivision or an exemption, and then they keep coming back and then like kind of creeping around, let's say a cul-de-sac, or just extending the development so that ultimately it becomes a subdivision? And so in this situation, while the answer, you know, to some of these are yes, the lots nearby are not part of the same development. They're not done by the same person. They just happen to share a road and be residential lots. Is the requested exemption unsuitable for the intended use? And this answer could probably be the same for every single exemption you see, which is, yeah, this is the only exemption that can accomplish this proposed division, with the exception of subdivision. Or in this case, if they wanted to simply put buildings on there and not create lots for sale, they could do buildings for lease or rent review. Again, as I said, that's the same for every applicant. So I think this is the last, yeah. And this is probably one of the most important, I think, for you to consider as you determine whether, you know, there's an intent to evade. Would the exemption cause significant impacts relative to subdivision review criteria that would likely lead to the imposition of significant conditions of approval or denial, or an equivalent subdivision proposal? And so what we did was we looked at I tried to look at all the things generally that would you review in a subdivision proposal, and where you might see conditions of approval. And in fact, I went back to the 1990 staff report to see what they recommended conditions of approval on. And they generally followed these categories here: water quality, storm drainage, sanitation, floodplain riparian, although actually back then they didn't have riparian, ped walkways. There were maybe 5 conditions that were very kind of boilerplate from the 90s, basically stating you have to have a riparian management plan, You have to install ped walkways. Your road has to be a certain width. It was classic 1990s. It was very fun. So we looked at how would these play a role in this subdivision, and the shared driveways are proposed. The County Public Works, who has jurisdiction over Mullen Road at that location, is very happy with that proposal, and they'll look at the details for approaches as they get closer to building permits, but that seems to be what they're looking for. All of the lots have been kept off the floodplain. They've been managing this property as a golf course for over 30 years, and its riparian resources protected that way. And they'll need to comply with building code and fire code, fire protection. The parkland dedication is an 11% dedication would be required if this were a subdivision, and with a 239 acre golf course, we would likely have found that to satisfy an open space dedication, and looked at traffic impacts on Mullen at this location where average daily trips are less than 1,000. And so those approaches, that's why Public Works is satisfied that traffic will not be impeded by having approaches directly onto Mullen at this location. And so the staff analysis conclusion was that this exemption request would not cause significant impacts warranting, conditions of approval that are not going to be mitigated through some other means on this property. And then I just have 3 photos, and then I'm going to leave you with a motion. We have an Attorney General's opinion that asserts that exemptions were not provided to allow a developer to create a division of land that is, for all intents and purposes, nothing less than an unreviewed subdivision. They were provided, however, to deal with exceptional circumstances where subdivision review is unnecessary, and our findings and conclusions arrive at a determination that these circumstances are unique and subdivision review in this particular instance is unnecessary. You can see a photo here just from earlier, I think it was last week, looking east, Mullen Road over to the left with the ped walkway along the frontage, and then the existing golf course off to the right, and the clubhouse in the background there. This analysis has shown that the amount of site improvement with conditions of subdivision approval would likely be negligible, and approval of the proposed boundary line relocation is appropriate. We cannot impose conditions on a boundary line relocation. So we are relying on having reviewed this for things like the ped walkway that exists, the traffic impacts that have been addressed through shared driveways, the riparian and floodplain issues that have been addressed by keeping that off the lots, is what caused us to arrive at this decision, along with the inability to not create additionally unreviewed lots. And you can see the homes across Mullen in King Ranch Phase 1. Those will be facing the duplex lots that will be constructed. And then finally, photos showing the proposed location of those residential tracts, and off to the right on that image showing where the yellow is the existing trail. And I heard a presentation from our Public Works Department talking about a new proposed trail from Frenchtown to Houston that will be connecting directly in front and adjacent to this property. So this is our recommended motion, and I just want to remind you that the list of review criteria are not designed to be conclusive, nor is there a specified threshold for the number of criteria that you meet. You kind of have to look at it, the whole context and all of the things that I've described. And as a result, we have recommended approval as shown in this motion here for you to use. Or if you would like to explore another option, I'm happy to provide language for that as well. Thank you.
Really minor, that last slide, it looked like they were residential.
No, I think that's just shadow. There is because the floodplain image shows the floodplain coming to right, kind of the back of those lots. I think that's shadow of the slope drop off right there. Well, there are cattails down in the floodplain area. Yeah.
Thanks, Jenny. So,
Yeah, I know.
so before we dive into questions from you guys, would developers representative like to speak to this?
Hi, my name's Tony Hilliard. I'm with Voith Engineering. And first of all, I want to say thank you, Jenny. It was a great presentation, and thanks for considering this item today. I'm joined by Cody Swartz and Tynan Heck from our office as well. And we're just here to answer any questions you might have and provide any further detail that you might need to make your decision.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you guys have, I have some questions, but I'll defer to you guys to go first. So Jenny, on the floodplain, are you using the latest draft? I think it's only in still draft form floodplain map or the older floodplain map?
I'm using the older floodplain map, but I did look at the newer floodplain maps, and I don't believe they are changing at this location.
Great. Thank you. That's super good to know. Yeah. My other stuff was just comments, so I'll wait till.
Yeah, I don't have any questions either.
So my comment on this is I think it's fortunate for you all that there were a number of lots on the before side of the BLR works out really well on the after side in terms of development, and that you don't have to go through subdivision review, which is really expensive. I also really appreciate where this is, that there aren't a lot of neighbors. This is pretty far out of town, that the impacts to people who live nearby are pretty minimal, or as Dave would say, de minimis. There's not much going on out here. Not that it isn't a very wonderful place, it's just not a very populated place. So some of the things associated with subdivision, I would feel should happen if this was in a populated place, because it would have an impact. But because it doesn't have an impact, I don't see it having an impact. It's not really that big a deal. It does feel somewhat unusual to do a BLR with this many lots, but it's all legal and it's out in a place where there's going to be minimal impacts. And I'm sure these will be wonderful duplexes overlooking a golf course, which is a perfectly nice place to live. So I don't have any issue with it given the greater context.
Yeah, I'll just chime in. I actually have voted to deny boundary line relocations out in rural areas not that far from here, but the difference being, and I think your last slide, Jenny, hit the nail on the head, that there are no perceivable conditions of approval that would be triggered even if this had gone through subdivision review. And so that really is the linchpin, because conceivably there could be circumstances here or in an adjacent area where something like this would sail through as a subdivision exemption, and those conditions of approval, those circumstances on the ground would not be picked up in this process, whereas they would be in a subdivision review process. But that's not the case here. So I would support staff's recommendation.
Second. Oh, I'm sorry.
Was that your motion?
That was not, no, I can make this motion here. So I would move to approve the request by Forlorn Hope LLC to utilize the relocation of common boundaries exemption on property located at 7775 Mullen Road, based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law and the staff analysis, and as presented in the exemption application and affidavit.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks,
You
guys,
all.
for coming.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, before you guys leave though, dying to know how the name
Forlorn Hope, my goodness.
for a ranch management company is too perfect.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, one day we'll meet Jack and I'll have to ask him. Okay, thanks.
Thanks for coming today.